It's often said that the best CGI is that which you don't notice. And with that in mind, these deviously sly VFX moments prove how CGI is often a result of intense creativity and even problem solving. If you did manage to spot any of the superbly sneaky VFX moments, give yourself a well-earned pat on the back. But let's be honest, you probably didn't. Either way, I am Gareth, this is Whatculture, and here are CGI movie shots you never noticed. Marta's fingers, Knives Out. Knives Out unforgettably ends with Marta emerging triumphant over the entire Thrombey dynasty, in turn inheriting novelist Harlan's fortune and mansion. This is cemented by an ingenious final shot in which Marta is shown to be drinking from a coffee mug, briefly shown earlier in the film, which reads, "My house, my rules, my coffee." The shot is framed such that Marta's fingers are covering "my rules" and "my coffee", leaving only "my house" visible at the top. A wonderfully witty visual gag which hilariously confirms Marta's victory. But during editing, filmmaker Ryan Johnson realized that the preceding shots of Marta holding the mug gave away the gag too early to keen-eyed audience members, and so had Ana de Armas's finger placement digitally altered to block the words on the mug until the glorious reveal in the final shot. Though ultimately an incredibly trivial piece of VFX work that most people could learn to do on their laptop in a few hours, it crucially ensures that the closing shot isn't spoiled prematurely and robbed of its departing impact. The Jeep Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park truly is one of the all-time great marvels of Hollywood effects, and over 30 years since it first came out, it's lost little of its awe-striking luster. While of course the focal dinosaurs were achieved through a mixture of practical animatronics and VFX wizardry, there's one shot which has way more CGI going on than you surely noticed. After the T-Rex turns over the Ford Explorer Jeep containing Tim and Lex, it continues to attack the Jeep, while trying to get to a terrified Tim and Lex who are attempting to escape through the back window. Most surely assumed that this was achieved by practically shooting the Jeep being jostled around with wires, and then adding in the dinosaur digitally, but that's not giving the magicians at Industrial Light and Magic nearly enough credit. As it turns out, the Jeep was also an entirely digital asset, while the stunt performers for Tim and Lex also shot their performances on a blue screen, which were then composited inside the Jeep. Basically, the only thing that's quote-unquote real in this shot is the background. The dinosaur, Jeep, and humans were all added in later, and yet it's an astonishingly believable effect, especially for 1993, with ILM smartly helping sell the illusion through the scene's dark lighting and cover of rain. Incredible. Now I want to know what's your favorite dino moment in movie history. Was it something from Jurassic Park or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below. Howard's shrinking eyes, Uncut Gems. Uncut Gems is a stressful enough movie before you even consider terrifying nonsense like this, where directors Josh and Benny Safdie use subtle CGI to further toy with audiences. Early on, after Howard Ratner first gazes upon the rare black opal which comes to consume him, he says his rather infamous one-liner that I props can't repeat, at which point you should look closely at his eyes. Suddenly, Howard's eyes appear to subtly shrink in their sockets. While at first there was debate about whether Adam Sandler simply could have scrunched his face or squinted in a way which made his eyes appear smaller, the Safdies addressed the matter twice on Twitter, claiming both times that Howard is quote-unquote possessed. Though Uncut Gems' mere $90 million budget evidently didn't allow much in the way of VFX, it could at least stretch to give the Sandman creepily shrunken eyes. Because that's what's really important in this movie, right? Bond's hands, Skyfall. There are a migraine-inducing number of moving parts on any blockbuster film set, such that it's easy for even obvious mistakes to be made if departments aren't communicating or everything isn't being thought through. Case in point, according to filmmaker Charlie Lynn, while Skyfall was being shot, Daniel Craig asked director Sam Mendes if he could wear his own gloves for the Macau casino sequence, to which Mendes agreed. However, while the film was being edited, an editorial assistant pointed out that the gloves created a gaping hole in the scene's logic. The sequence culminates in Bond fighting an oversized goon who is unable able to use Bond's own gun against him, because it has a fingerprint scanner hard-coded to 007's fingerprints. And so if Bond is wearing gloves throughout the entire sequence, how on earth is he able to use the gun to shoot the goon at the end? There's no way his fingerprints could be scanned through the gloves. At this point, Mendes and Skyfall producers considered the cost of reshooting the sequence, before deducing it was cheapest to simply digitally paint over Craig's hands with a fleshy tone. Yep, that's what they went with. And so if you watch the scene with this knowledge in mind, and zoom in close on Craig's hands, they look ever so slightly off, like someone wearing, well, a flesh-coloured glove, because that's effectively what it is. Nightmare fuel, you could say. The Hazmat suit's arrival. If you've seen Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, you'll likely remember the distinct orange hazmat-style suits worn by protagonist Louise Banks and various other scientist characters as they enter one of the hovering alien spacecraft. There's no reason to assume that these suits are anything but practical ones worn by the cast. And yet a VFX breakdown for the film confirms that, in fact, the suits were often 100% CGI. Amy Adams is shown wearing a mocap suit in place of the hazmat suit in numerous shots. And yet the digital suit is so convincing in the final film, you'd almost certainly never assume any trickery was afoot. It certainly helps that the interior of the alien craft is darkly lit, but even then this is a staggeringly subtle and impressive effect, even if it's not as showy as many of the others on this list. Thanks for watching this video today, stuff full of secret CGI. And if you like what you see, then tap on that subscribe button down below. The Quidditch players, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Now, to be clear, nobody thinks that children are actually flying on broomsticks during the original Harry Potter's iconic Quidditch sequence, but it's nevertheless assumed that real flesh and blood human actors are flying around on wires, enacting all the movements, right? But as has become considerably more obvious since the entire franchise was released in 4K a few years ago, the scene was actually achieved with a combination of actors on wires and sneaky digital doubles. However, some are certainly far more convincing than others, and if you pause it at just the right moment, you might be able to spot a few disconcertingly plastic-faced Quidditch players. It's of course important to appreciate that the original film is close to 25 years of age. Do you feel old yet? And this sequence remains an impressive achievement for its time. Yet back in 2001, VFX just wasn't advanced enough to persuasively replicate the essence of a human being, and it shows. Marlon Brando's smile, the score. Marlon Brando is widely known for being one of the most difficult yet brilliant actors to ever stand in front of a camera, and so it was fitting that the legend's very final scene in his very final movie saw him once again being uncooperative. In 2001's underappreciated heist film The Score, the final scene in the script called for Brando's character Max to smile as he watches a news report detailing the huge manhunt for Jack Teller. But during filming, Brando, who had argued with director Frank Oz throughout production, refused to smile for the scene, opting instead for a more neutral, blank expression. This forced Oz to fix the issue in post-production, creating a smile by digitally manipulating Brando's face and lips. It might look convincing enough in a screenshot of the moment, but in motion the morph is considerably more obvious, the bottom part of Brando's face moving in an ever so slightly unnatural way. Once you know it's there, it's incredibly difficult not to notice this one, and what a note for Brando's career to end on, eh? The shopping bags, Shazam. Subtle CGI is indeed a wonderful art in of itself, especially when it's used in creative and clever ways to solve problems which the filmmakers didn't notice while shooting. Case in point, Shazam director David F. Sandberg posted a video to his brilliantly informative YouTube channel, revealing how he ingeniously dealt with an issue during the scene where Shazam flies through a mall. While nobody's under any illusion that Shazam's flight was achieved with anything other than CGI, if you move your eyes over to the right-hand side of the frame, there's some VFX trickery you almost certainly missed. The quote-unquote extras on the right were actually part of the film crew who didn't realize they were being filmed. And with post-production time running out, Sandberg had to consider a quick and dirty way to make their presence seem more natural. He ultimately fixed the issue by simply having his VFX team give the crew members shopping bags and a mop, making it seem like they were supposed to be there all along. Brilliant stuff. Tony Stark at the beach, Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 memorably ends with Tony Stark tossing his now unnecessary arc reactor into the sea before confirming that yes, he is still Iron Man. While you might assume that Robert Downey Jr. simply shot the scene on a soundstage and the cliff edge was digitally added later, a very reasonable assumption indeed. There's a jaw-droppingly impressive invisible effect right in front of your very face. The film's VFX supervisor Chris Townsend revealed shortly after Iron Man 3's release that because Robert Downey Jr. was recovering from an ankle injury when this scene was supposed to be shot, it had to be filmed without him. Basically, a body double filmed the scene in person, and then a digital scan of Downey's face was pasted over the double's own. Though some folk online have retroactively claimed that the scene always looked a little bit off, let's be honest, if they hadn't flat out told you it was CGI, would you ever have been able to tell? No, you would not, you liar. Johnny Depp never blinks, Dark Shadows. Tim Burton's big screen adaptation of 1960s gothic soap opera Dark Shadows stars Johnny Depp as vampire Barnabas Collins. And in order to further sell the notion that Depp was playing a bloodsucker, Burton went to the extreme of touching up almost every shot of his performance digitally. Watch the movie and you will not see Barnabas blink even a single time, because Burton had all of Depp's blinks digitally removed to further enhance the uncanny nature of his appearance. While one could certainly entertain the notion that Depp, ever an acting masochist, did this the hard way by simply not blinking on set, Burton ended up letting the VFX team do it in post, the results of which are at least impressively seamless. Then again, given that the $150 million Dark Shadows is awash in so much CGI in almost every single shot, this sneaky flourish gets to basically hide in plain sight. But no more, as you'll not be able to take your eyes off of Depp's next time you dive into this Burton flick. Falling objects on a train, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. The mighty Tom Cruise prides himself on very much diving headfirst into just about every practical stunt possible during the shooting of any of his movies. And sure enough, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning once again saw Cruise driving a motorcycle off a cliff, running/fighting on the top of a train, and hanging onto the inside of many of said vehicle's carriages as it dangled off a bridge for real on screen. However, just because these moments often require the Hollywood superstar and his co-stars to do some entirely practical stunt work, doesn't mean that the whole scene was free from digital assistance. Take that aforementioned many falling carriages sequence for example. While Cruise and Hayley Atwell were definitely scrambling their way up the vertical carriage, with the two being connected to wires as a practical rig of the train was flipped, you likely didn't notice that a bunch of what you saw here is actually CGI. As revealed in a fascinating industrial light and magic behind the magic clip, everything from the location seen outside the windows, to the moving curtains, to just about every piece of furniture that dangerously drops down next to Ethan Hunt and Grace, were all digital, baby. And that piano that dramatically plummets out the back of the carriage, that was computer generated too, making an already thrilling sequence that little more impressive when you realize just how much of it was brilliantly added into the scenario digitally. Now I want to know, what do you think is the best action scene of the last 5 years? Was it something from Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning or something else? You let me know in the comments section down below. A completely digital killer, the Killer. As you'll see again in this list before its conclusion, if a David Fincher movie finds itself having to rely on CGI at any point, you can pretty much guarantee it will be some of the most seamless digital wizardry you'll ever see. And that was certainly the case when it came to one specific sequence during the director's latest picture, The Killer. At one point in this thriller, which follows Michael Fassbender's assassin in the wake of a hit going wrong, said killer can be seen riding a moped through the streets of Paris. But it was actually later revealed by the artist behind the movie's superb visual effects that a lot of this scene contained a fully digital Fassbender. Fincher was said to have not been happy with the moments they'd filmed on a virtual stage beforehand. So the team at Wiley Co. VFX were tasked with crafting a photorealistic Fassbender and nearly full CG shots that would be cut into the live-action moments without anyone noticing. And they more than achieved that goal in the end, with just about nobody realizing that they were often watching a largely CG assassin here during the scene's many extreme close-ups of Fassbender's face and the shots of his full body scooting around town. Impressive stuff. The sand was digitally altered for Keanu Reeves' horse ride. John Wick Chapter 4. Another star who typically likes to get his hands dirty when it comes to a movie's various stunts, Keanu Reeves once again kicked all of the ass and saddled up for real during the making of John Wick Chapter 4. However, while that is certainly the John Wick actor himself on the back of a horse during the opening desert sequence, one that was shot in Jordan just so you know, there was still a little bit of digital tinkering on show as he galloped after his enemies. You see, as explained by the film's visual effects supervisors Jonathan Rothbart and Janelle Croshaw-Roller, sand can be a bit of a pain in the ass during shooting. So, despite being filmed on location for this moment, the team ended up replacing a lot of that sand digitally just to hide all of the tracks and the machinery. Perhaps the most impressive CGI moment to go down in this opening stretch, however, can be seen as Reeves makes his steed skid to a stop. The actor did this for real because of course he did during the pickup shoot in Los Angeles. All that sandy Jordan footage was then ultimately given to Light VFX, who created an entirely CG environment to throw the real dusty stop into. The end results are about as convincing as it gets, with just about nobody watching on assuming there was anything digital about Wick's awesome desert skid in the feature. The blood is CGI, the girl with the dragon tattoo. Returning to Fincher land for this next entry, and to another one of his features that contains some surprisingly subtle CG details pretty much every viewer didn't spot. When a character is required to lose a little blood at some point in a movie, more often than not, practical fake red liquid will be thrown onto an actor on the day. But with Fincher being a director who likes to get a great many takes in the can, having to go back and redo said bloody makeup for each one would be a bit of a pain. So instead, in the likes of Zodiac and the girl with the dragon tattoo, Fincher opted to use largely digital blood. That scene when Daniel Craig's Mikael Blomkvist is seen bleeding in the bathtub and being stitched up by Rooney Mara's Lisbeth Salander, the movie's VFX breakdown by Digital Domain shows that the blood streaming down Craig's face was remarkably created via CGI, though the practical cut itself was seemingly present on set, as vodka was poured over Mikael's head. Even with this knowledge in mind, it's hard to accept that the real-looking red stuff dripping down Craig's face here is a computer-generated creation when rewatching the gripping thriller. But it is definitely the truth, folks. J-Law's digital tooth. Don't look up. During the filming of Adam McKay's apocalyptic satire known as Don't Look Up, Jennifer Lawrence had a bit of a dental mare. The Oscar winner actually ended up losing a tooth pretty early on, not because of a daring stunt gone wrong or anything. Nope, as Lawrence would tell Stephen Colbert on The Late Show, the star's veneer came loose whilst eating a lollipop. But with shooting going down in the middle of COVID, J-Law wasn't able to get to a dentist to fix her tooth. Instead of just having the actor show up on screen boasting the pointy fang that had been hiding underneath said veneer though, the VFX team provided an unnoticeable digital solution. Pretty much every single time you see Kate Dibiaski's teeth on screen in a shot during this 2021 black comedy then, you're actually looking at some rather outstanding and incredibly subtle VFX work, with her fang, as she put it, ultimately being replaced by a CG tooth in post-production. Who needs a dentist when you've got some digital wizards, eh? Thanks for checking out this CGI stuff video today. Now go and hit that subscribe button down below for more of this fascinating Whatculture stuff in your life. A real door but a digital home. The Wolf of Wall Street. Folks tend to think of many things when Martin Scorsese's black comedy based on the life and career of real-life stockbroker Jordan Belfort pops up in a conversation. Seamless CGI usually isn't one of them though, but Marty's The Wolf of Wall Street does very much contain a ton of wonderful CGI shots that are so well done very few even realize they were being digitally tricked whilst taking in this slick story of corruption and greed. The brilliant artists over at Brainstorm Digital eventually revealed just how many of the scenes in Scorsese's 2013 epic were created with a little CG assistance. Much of the background scene when Naomi LaPaglia wanders to their yacht in Italy, for example, was actually digitally created, with that particular scene being shot in a studio. Then you have the moment when Jordan goes to visit Naomi's aunt Emma. Though it may look like he's just rocked up to a fancy cream home in London, this was actually originally a brick building in real life, with everything but the door being incredibly digitally replaced for the moment Jordan enters Emma's lush flat. Take a bow, Brainstorm Digital, take a bow. The Gummy Bears, Gone Girl. One more instance of the great David Fincher unleashing some rather terrific invisible CGI into our lives. His utterly enthralling thriller known as Gone Girl also contained a number of easy-to-miss digital details. As noted in a YouTube video essay from Captain Christian, not only was the moment Rosamund Pike's Amy nailed a perfect put in the movie brought to screen via convincing CGI, a scene involving a sweet treat was too. When Ben Affleck's Nick is being prepped for a TV interview by his lawyer, Tyler Perry's Tanner chooses to fire gummy bears at his client every time he thinks he looks smug, annoyed, or tense. But each time those pieces of candy bounce off of Nick's head in the scene and manage to remain in frame, you likely didn't spot that these were actually entirely digital bears thrown into the movie in post-production. It's explained in the essay that the director opted to use CGI here, as trying to nail Affleck with the sweets in the precise way needed for the shot would have been tough to recreate in multiple takes. So he simply made his life that little bit easier by launching some CG edible animals at his star's noggin instead. Mics were digitally erased, Les Miserables. Rather than record each and every one of his stars in a studio and throw a more polished version of the iconic tunes found in Les Miserables into his 2012 period musical, Tom Hooper opted to record his actors warbling live on set. While the end results were a bit of a mixed bag musically, there's no denying that it definitely helped the various actors to perform and react with more freedom on the day of shooting, with the director himself telling the New York Times it was a more natural way of doing it. In order to capture those live sounds though, the likes of Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, and more all had to walk around singing with radio mics on their persons. Jean Valjean would have looked a little bit silly letting out an emotional rendition of Bring Him Home with a wire sticking out of his outfit. So each and every actor had to have these little mics and the earpieces they used to hear the song being played in real time digitally removed in post-production. There you have it then. Everything from empty chairs and empty tables to Do You Hear the People Sing secretly possessed a bit of CG assistance in this miserable movie. Hugh Jackman's digital face, Logan. Speaking of Jean Valjean himself, Hugh Jackman was also at the center of one more difficult to notice piece of CGI during the making of another rather moving film, though there are a few more claws in this one. Rather than having a mic removed after letting out his vibrato though, a full Jackman was actually impressively digitally created for a few pulsating scenes in 2017's Logan, along with an also quite magnificent digital double being made for the clone Wolverine would clash with in the movie. A CG Jackman was brilliantly dropped into a shot involving Logan, Charles Xavier, and Laura getting rammed by an incoming vehicle as they attempt to flee in a limo. The masterful team at Image Engine would later reveal in a VFX breakdown video that a stunt double was really doing the perilous driving here, with a hugely convincing digital version of the X-Men actor then painted over his movements in the vehicle. The fact there's also so much going down in this particularly intense shot made it just about impossible to spot that this was actually a CGI Jackman getting thrown around the limousine here. And even after learning of this ridiculous piece of digital trickery, you can't help but marvel at the tremendous way it smoothly cut into the rest of the chase. CGI genitals were added into certain shots, the Northman. Robert Eggers' 2022 Viking epic The Northman certainly didn't hold back when it came to mesmerizing sequences of brutal violence. But perhaps the most memorable of the lot goes down towards the end of the routinely savage experience, when Alexander Skarsgård's Amleth fights Klaus Bang's Fjolnir by a volcano. Both Amleth and his uncle were entirely naked during this duel to the death, but Eggers would actually later reveal that his actors weren't made to perform the entire fiery sequence in the buff. According to the director, mostly due to the fact that nobody wanted to get their bits chopped off, which is understandable, or the genitals seen on screen in this scene were actually created via CGI. Skarsgård and Bang were swinging their swords whilst wearing thongs on the day, and Eggers opted for these digital additions for some shots so that they didn't look too Ken-dollish, in his words. Very few were likely focusing on the star's nether regions during this particularly explosive showdown anyway, but those that were no doubt didn't notice that a specific portion of both actors had been digitally replaced in order to protect them from a potentially horrific scenario. Lucky boys.